He walked into the bakery to order a wedding cake for another woman. He never expected to see the face of the wife he abandoned 5 years ago. He definitely never expected the little girl gripping her hand. The glass door chimed as Kang Min-jae pushed it open, and the scent of vanilla and warm sugar hit him immediately. He paused, one polished shoe inside the bakery, the other still on the sidewalk. His security detail waited by the black sedan, confused. In 12 years of running Korea's third-largest tech conglomerate, Min-jae had never personally chosen anything for his weddings, his galas, his corporate events. But today, something had pulled him here, something he couldn't name. The bakery was small, too small for a man who controlled boardrooms across 3 continents. The walls were cream-colored, lined with photos of smiling customers and handwritten thank-you notes. A chalkboard menu hung crookedly near the register. Classical music played softly from a speaker somewhere, and then he saw her. She stood behind the counter, her back to him, tying an apron around her waist. Her hair was pulled into a simple bun, shorter than he remembered. Her skin, deep and rich like polished mahogany, caught the afternoon light streaming through the window. She turned, reaching for something on the shelf, and Min-jae's breath stopped. Diane. She hadn't noticed him yet. She was humming, completely absorbed in arranging pastries in the display case. Min-jae's hand tightened on the door handle. 5 years. It had been 5 years since she'd walked out of his life without explanation, without a forwarding address, without a single word after the divorce papers arrived at his office. He should leave. He should turn around, get back in the car, and have his secretary order the wedding cake online like a normal person in his position would. But his feet wouldn't move. Then Diane looked up. Their eyes met across the small space, and Min-jae watched the color drain from her face. The small notepad in her hand slipped, hitting the counter with a soft thud. For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. Neither of them breathed. Min-jae, she whispered. Before he could respond, before he could form words around the shock lodged in his throat, a child's laughter rang out from the back room. Small feet pounded against the floor, and a little girl burst through the doorway behind the counter, her pigtails bouncing as she ran. "Mommy, Mommy, I finished the drawing." The child clutched a piece of paper covered in crayon marks, her face bright with pride. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old. She wore a yellow dress with white flowers, and her skin was a beautiful blend, lighter than Diane's but carrying the same warm undertones. But it was her eyes that made Min-jae's world tilt violently on its axis. Almond-shaped, dark, unmistakably Korean, unmistakably his. The little girl stopped when she noticed the stranger in her mother's bakery. She pressed closer to Diane's leg, suddenly shy, peeking out at Min-jae with curious eyes that reflected his own face back at him. "Lena, sweetheart, go back to the playroom for just a moment, okay?" Diane's voice was steady, but Min-jae heard the tremor underneath. He'd always been able to hear it, even when she tried to hide her fear, her hurt, her anger. "But I wanted to show you. I'll come see it in just a minute. I promise." Diane's hand shook as she smoothed her daughter's hair. "Go on now." Lena obeyed, but not before glancing back at Min-jae one more time. Something in her expression, a tilt of her head, a curiosity in her gaze. It was him. It was undeniably him. The door to the back room closed. The classical music continued playing. Outside, a car honked, and Min-jae stood frozen in the small bakery, staring at the woman he'd loved and lost, knowing that everything he thought he understood about the past 5 years had just shattered. "How long were you going to keep this from me?" His voice came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. Diane's jaw tightened. She picked up the notepad she'd dropped, her movements careful and controlled. "You need to leave. That child. You need to leave, Min-jae." Her voice was stronger now, but he saw her hand shaking. "You have no right to come in here and—" "No right?" The words exploded from him, louder than he'd intended. Years of discipline, of maintaining perfect control in every negotiation, every crisis, it all evaporated. "I have a daughter, and you never told me?" "Lower your voice." Diane's eyes flashed, and there was the fire he remembered. The strength that had first drawn him to her at that international business summit 7 years ago, when she'd challenged his presentation in front of 200 executives and made him rethink his entire approach to emerging markets. "This is my place of business, and you will not cause a scene." "A scene?" Min-jae laughed, a harsh sound that hurt his own throat. "You disappeared. You left me with papers and silence. And now I find out I have a—" He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. The enormity of it was crushing him. Diane set down the notepad very carefully. When she looked at him again, her eyes were dry but hard. "You want to do this now? Fine. But not here. Not where she can hear. When, then? Another 5 years? The bakery closes at 6. Come to the back entrance at 6:30. She turned away, busying herself with rearranging pastries that didn't need rearranging. "And Min-jae? Come alone. No security, no assistants, no representatives from your mother's office." The mention of his mother landed like a physical blow. Min-jae's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "My mother has nothing to do with—" 6:30. Diane's voice was final. "Or don't come at all." Min-jae stood there for a moment longer, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his temples. Through the window to the back room, he could see a flash of yellow, Lena's dress, as she moved around, probably playing. His daughter. He had a daughter, and she didn't even know who he was. He turned and walked out of the bakery, the chime above the door sounding obscenely cheerful. His security chief straightened as Min-jae approached the car, concern flickering across his professionally neutral expression. "Sir? The cake order. Drive." Min-jae's voice was flat. "Just drive." As the car pulled away from the curb, Min-jae looked back through the tinted window. Diane stood in the bakery doorway, watching him leave. Even from this distance, even through the glass, he could see the rigid set of her shoulders, the way she hugged her arms around herself. He'd seen her stand like that once before, the day she'd left him. The car merged into Seoul's afternoon traffic, and Min-jae leaned his head back against the leather seat, closing his eyes. His mind was racing, fragments of memory colliding with the present, trying to calculate, to understand. 4 years old. Maybe 5. Which meant Diane had been pregnant when she left. Pregnant when his mother had called her into that conference room at corporate headquarters, when the accusations had started flying, when the security footage had been altered to show Diane accessing files she'd never touched, when the board had demanded her removal from Min-jae's life as a condition of his continued leadership. Pregnant when Min-jae had stood in his corner office, looking down at the divorce papers she'd signed without contest, telling himself she must have been guilty all along, that if she truly loved him, she would have fought harder, that her silence was proof of her betrayal. His phone buzzed. The 10th message from his fiancée, Park Seo-yeon. The wedding was in 3 weeks. The guest list numbered 437, including executives from every major corporation in Seoul, 3 members of the National Assembly, and 2 cabinet ministers. The merger between his company and her father's pharmaceutical empire had already been announced to shareholders. Min-jae looked at the screen, at Seo-yeon's name, and felt nothing. He'd felt nothing when he proposed 6 months ago, nothing when they'd posed for engagement photos, nothing when she'd shown him fabric samples for the reception hall. His mother had arranged everything, as she always did, and he'd agreed, as he always did, because it made sense, because marriage to Seo-yeon meant stability, expansion, power, because Diane was gone, and he'd taught himself not to feel anything at all. But now, "Sir?" His driver's voice interrupted. "Where should I take you?" Min-jae opened his eyes. The afternoon stretched ahead, full of meetings he needed to cancel, calls he needed to make, lies he needed to maintain. But first, he needed answers. He needed to understand how the woman he'd married, the woman he'd loved with an intensity that had frightened him, the woman who'd walked away without explanation, how she'd been carrying his child the entire time. "The office," he said finally, "and clear my schedule for tonight." His security chief shifted in the front passenger seat. "Sir, you have the charity gala at 8. Your mother specifically requested—" "Clear it." Min-jae's tone left no room for argument. "Tell them I'm ill. Tell them whatever you need to. But my evening is not available." He had 6 hours until 6:30. 6 hours to prepare for a conversation that terrified him more than any hostile takeover, any shareholder revolt, any corporate crisis he'd ever faced. 6 hours, until he had to face the truth about what he'd lost, and what he might have just found. The afternoon crawled by with excruciating slowness. Min Jae sat in his office on the 48th floor, Seoul spread out beneath him like a circuit board of lights and steel. He'd built this. Every connection, every deal, every strategic alliance. He'd sacrificed everything for this view, this power, this legacy, everything except the one thing that had actually mattered. His assistant knocked softly. "Sir? Mrs. Kang is on line 1. Min Jae's jaw tightened, his mother. Of course she'd heard about the cancelled gala. Nothing happened in his life without her knowledge, her input, her control. "Tell her I'll call her back. She's been quite insistent, sir. This is her 4th. I said I'll call her back." Min Jae's voice was sharp enough that his assistant bowed quickly and retreated. He turned his chair to face the window. Somewhere out there in a small bakery in a neighborhood he'd never had reason to visit, his daughter was playing, drawing pictures, living a life he knew nothing about. His phone buzzed again. Not Seo-yeon this time, but his mother calling directly. He declined it. She called again immediately, and again. On the 4th call, he answered. "Where are you?" His mother's voice was crisp, controlled, imperious. "The gala is in 3 hours, and Seo-yeon's mother is calling me in a panic because you've canceled all your appointments and your assistant won't explain why. I'm taking the evening for personal matters." A pause. When his mother spoke again, her voice had dropped to that dangerous quiet he knew well. What personal matters could possibly be more important than your obligations? The merger announcement is next week. Every major investor will be at this gala. Your absence will be noted, Min Jae. It will raise questions. Let them ask questions. "Excuse me?" Min Jae stood, pacing to the window. Far below, people moved through the streets like blood cells through veins, everyone going somewhere, everyone with a purpose. "I said let them ask questions. I'm not attending tonight. This is unacceptable. Whatever childish rebellion you think you're staging." "I saw Diane today." The silence on the other end was absolute. Min Jae could picture his mother in her sitting room, the same room where she had told him 5 years ago that Diane was a liability, a scandal waiting to happen, a mistake that needed to be corrected before it destroyed everything the Kang family had built. When she finally spoke, her voice was ice. "That woman has no place in your life anymore. Whatever she wants, whatever scheme she's running, she has a child." Min Jae's reflection stared back at him from the window, his face pale. A daughter. 4, maybe 5 years old. Another pause. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm telling you I have a daughter I never knew about. Don't be ridiculous. You have no proof the child is yours. This is clearly a ploy for money, for—" "She has my eyes, Mother. My exact eyes." Min Jae's voice cracked. "Diane was pregnant when she left. When you accused her of corporate espionage, when you made her sign those papers. I saved your career. I saved this company from a scandal that would have destroyed everything your father built. You destroyed my marriage. I saved you from a disastrous mistake." His mother's composure finally broke. "That woman was never appropriate for this family, for your position, a foreigner with no connections, no understanding of our world. She would have ruined you. So you ruined her instead. I protected you. As I always have. As I always will." His mother's breathing was sharp now, controlled fury barely contained. "And if this child exists, if by some chance she is biologically related to you, it changes nothing. You have a wedding in 3 weeks to a woman who is actually suited to be your wife. You have responsibilities, obligations. I have a daughter." Min Jae closed his eyes. "And I'm going to meet her properly tonight. If you pursue this, if you acknowledge this child, you will lose everything. The board will never accept it. Seo-yeon's family will pull out of the merger. Your reputation, my reputation." Min Jae laughed the sound bitter. 5 years ago, I let you convince me that my reputation mattered more than the truth. That corporate stability mattered more than the woman I loved. I'm not making that mistake again. You're not thinking clearly. You're emotional. I'm done with this conversation, Mother. I'll see you when I see you." He ended the call before she could respond. His hands were shaking. In 36 years, he'd never hung up on his mother, never directly defied her. The power she held over him, over the company, over every aspect of his life, it had always been absolute, until now, until he'd seen Lena's eyes looking up at him from behind Diane's leg. At 6:15, Min Jae's driver dropped him 2 blocks from the bakery. He walked the rest of the way, his coat collar turned up against the evening chill. The streets here were quieter than the commercial district where his office stood. Small shops lined the sidewalk, a bookstore, a flower shop, a restaurant with handwritten specials in the window, the kind of neighborhood where a person could disappear, could build a life away from the spotlight. The bakery's main entrance was dark, the closed sign facing out. Min-jae walked around to the alley behind the building, where trash bins sat next to a single steel door. A light glowed above it. He knocked. The door opened immediately, as if Diane had been waiting on the other side. She'd changed out of her apron into jeans and a simple sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders now. She looked tired, beautiful and tired and guarded in a way that made Min-jae's chest ache. "Come in," she said quietly. The back room of the bakery was small, clearly serving as both storage and Lena's play area. Boxes of supplies were stacked against one wall, but the other side held a small table with coloring books, a bin of toys, and children's drawings taped to the wall. Min-jae recognized the yellow dress from earlier hanging on a hook near the door. "She's with a friend tonight," Diane said, following his gaze. "I thought it would be better if we talked alone first." Min-jae nodded, not trusting his voice. Now that he was here, now that Diane stood 3 feet away from him in the place she'd built without him, he didn't know where to start. There were too many questions, too much silence to break through. Diane moved to a small counter with a coffee maker. "Do you still drink it black?" "Yes." She poured 2 cups, handed him one. Her fingers didn't touch his, but he caught her scent, vanilla and sugar and something else, something that was just Diane, and the memories hit him so hard he had to set the cup down before he dropped it. "When?" he asked. "When did you know?" Diane leaned against the counter, both hands wrapped around her coffee mug. "I found out 3 days after your mother called me into her office. 3 days after I signed the divorce papers. 3 days. Min-jae felt his knees weaken. "You didn't tell me. How could I?" Diane's voice was steady, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Your mother made it very clear what would happen if I stayed in your life. She showed me the fabricated evidence. She showed me how easily she could destroy my name, my career. And then she told me that if I was carrying your child, she would make sure that child never had a future in this country. She threatened our baby." The words came out strangled. "She said she would ensure any child I had with you would be labeled illegitimate, would be barred from the company, would never be acknowledged by the Kang family. She said she would use her influence to make sure no school would accept her, no company would hire her when she grew up. That the scandal of your divorce and my betrayal would follow her forever." Diane's voice finally broke. She said the only way to protect your child was to disappear, to let you believe there was no child at all. Min-jae sank into one of the small chairs at the children's table, his head in his hands. "I would have protected you, both of you." "No, you wouldn't have." Diane's words were soft but certain. "You would have tried. But Min-jae, you couldn't even protect me when it was just accusations. When your mother showed you that fake security footage, when the board demanded my removal, you believed them over me. I asked you to explain, to defend yourself. You asked me once. One conversation, in your office, with your mother's lawyer present. And when I couldn't prove a negative, when I couldn't prove I hadn't done something I'd never done, you accepted their version of events." Diane set down her coffee cup. "You chose them over me. What made you think you'd choose differently when it came to our child?" The truth of it was crushing. Min-jae remembered that day, that conversation. He remembered the doubt that had crept in when Diane couldn't provide an alibi for every minute the files had allegedly been accessed. He remembered his mother's calm, reasonable voice pointing out that love could blind a person, that sometimes the people we trust most were the ones who betrayed us. He'd wanted Diane to fight harder, to rage, to demand, to refuse to leave until she'd cleared her name. Instead, she'd gone quiet. She'd signed the papers his mother's lawyers put in front of her. She'd walked out of his life without looking back, and he'd let her go. "I was pregnant, alone, and terrified," Diane continued. "Your mother had made it clear she had the power and the will to ruin both of us. So I took what money I'd saved. I left Seoul, and I built a life where Lena would be safe, where she could grow up without the shadow of the Kang family hanging over her. For 5 years. Min-jae looked up at her. "For 5 years you've been raising our daughter alone." "Yes." "Why did you come back to Seoul?" "I didn't want to. But my mother got sick last year. She lives 20 minutes from here. I needed to be close to take care of her. Diane's expression softened slightly. Lena deserves to know her grandmother. The one grandmother who actually wants to know her. The barb landed. Min Jae absorbed it without flinching. What have you told Lena about me? That her father is a busy man who lives far away, that sometimes adults make complicated choices. Diane pulled a chair out and sat across from him. She's 4 years old, Min Jae. She asks sometimes, but she doesn't really understand yet what it means not to have a father around. I want to know her. The words came out desperate. I want to be part of her life. Why? Diane's eyes were hard now. Because she's yours? Because your pride is wounded that I kept her from you? Because she's my daughter. Min Jae's voice rose. Because I've lost 5 years already, and I don't want to lose any more. And what about your wedding? Your fiancé? Your mother's plans for your perfect merger marriage? Diane leaned forward. Lena isn't a secret you can keep, Min Jae. If you acknowledge her, if you're part of her life, everyone will know. Your mother, your board, every media outlet in Seoul. They'll dig into why I left. They'll find the accusations. They'll let them. Min Jae stood, the small chair scraping against the floor. Let them dig. Let them ask questions. I don't care anymore. You don't care? Diane stood too, her voice rising to match his. You didn't care 5 years ago when it mattered. You didn't care when I needed you to believe in me, to stand up to your mother, to choose our marriage over your company. But now that there's a child you can claim, now you suddenly don't care what they think? I was wrong. The admission tore out of him. I was wrong 5 years ago. I was a coward who valued control over trust, who believed lies because they were easier than facing the truth. I let my mother manipulate me. I let the board intimidate me. I let you walk away because some part of me was too proud to fight for you. And I have regretted it every single day since. Diane's breath caught. Tears spilled over, running down her cheeks. Do you know what it was like? Do you know what it was like to love you so much? It physically hurt. To carry your child inside me. To know I'd never see you again. To tell our daughter bedtime stories about a prince who lived in a castle far away, knowing she'd probably never meet him. Min Jae stepped closer. Then let me meet her now. Let me try to be the father she deserves. Let me, and when your mother threatens her again, when the board demands you choose between your daughter and your company, when your fiancé's family pulls out of the merger and your stock prices drop and your investors start asking questions. Diane's voice cracked. What will you choose then, Min Jae? Will you choose Lena, or will you choose the same things you chose 5 years ago? The question hung between them, heavy and terrible. Through the wall, Min Jae could hear the hum of the refrigerator units, the distant sound of traffic. The drawings on the wall seemed to mock him, all those moments he'd missed, all those firsts he hadn't been there for. I'll choose her, he said finally, whatever it costs, whatever I have to give up. I'll choose her. You don't know what you're saying. You don't know what you'd be giving up. I know I've already given up 5 years. I know I've missed her first steps, her first words, 4 birthdays, countless bedtimes. I know I have a wedding scheduled to a woman I don't love, because it makes good business sense. I know my entire life is built on compromises and calculations and sacrifices, and none of it means anything. Min Jae's voice dropped to a whisper. None of it has ever meant anything without you. Diane closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were red but dry. I can't trust you with her heart, Min Jae. I can't trust you not to hurt her the way you hurt me. Then don't trust me. Not yet. But let me try. Let me prove to you that I can be the man I should have been 5 years ago. And your wedding. There won't be a wedding. Your mother. My mother doesn't control my life anymore. Min Jae pulled out his phone, pulled up his messages. Without hesitating, he typed a message to Seo Yeon. I'm sorry. I can't marry you. The wedding is canceled. He hit send before he could second-guess it. There. It's done. Diane stared at him. You just canceled your wedding by text message? Seo Yeon doesn't love me. She loves the idea of the merger, the social status, the power. She'll be angry about the embarrassment, but she won't be heartbroken. His phone immediately started buzzing with calls. He silenced it. The only woman whose heart I ever broke was yours. And I'm asking for the chance to make it right. This is insane. You're throwing away everything on a chance, on a maybe. I'm choosing my daughter. I'm choosing the possibility of being her father. If that's insane, then I don't want to be sane. Diane turned away, her shoulders shaking. Min-jae wanted to reach for her, to comfort her, but he'd lost that right years ago. So he stood there, watching her cry, letting the weight of everything they'd lost fill the small room. She likes strawberries, Diane said finally, her voice thick. She's allergic to shellfish. She has nightmares sometimes about monsters under her bed, and the only thing that helps is when I sing to her. She's learning to read, and her favorite books are about dragons. She's shy around new people, but once she trusts you, she talks non-stop. Min-jae's throat tightened. Thank you. I'm not saying yes. Diane turned back to face him. I'm saying I'll think about it. I'll talk to Lena, prepare her, and if I decide to let you into her life, it will be slow. It will be supervised, and the first moment you hurt her, the first time you choose your company or your mother or anything else over her well-being, I will take her somewhere you'll never find us. Do you understand? I understand. Go home, Min-jae. Deal with the chaos you just created. Talk to your mother, talk to your board. Figure out what your life looks like now that you've blown it up. And when you're sure, when you're absolutely certain you can handle the consequences of claiming her, call me. She pulled a business card from her pocket, wrote a number on the back and pressed it into his palm. Her fingers were warm against his skin, there and gone in a heartbeat. Min-jae closed his hand around the card. Can I ask you one more thing? What? Her name, Lena. Why did you choose it? Diane's smile was sad. It means light. After everything that happened, after all the darkness, I needed her to be light. Min-jae nodded, unable to speak around the emotion clogging his throat. He walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. I loved you, Diane. I never stopped. I know. Her voice was barely a whisper. That's what made it so hard to leave. He stepped out into the alley, into the cold evening air. Behind him, the door closed with a soft click. His phone was vibrating non-stop now, calls from his mother, from Seo-yeon, from his assistant, from board members. The explosion had begun. Min-jae looked at the business card in his hand. Tomorrow the media would erupt. Tomorrow his mother would wage war. Tomorrow everything he'd built would be tested. But tonight, he had the phone number of the woman he'd loved and lost. And somewhere in this city, his daughter was being tucked into bed, probably asking for a story about a prince in a castle. Min-jae pulled out his phone and made one call before the deluge. Sir? His lawyer's voice was alert despite the late hour. I need you to investigate something from 5 years ago. Corporate espionage charges against Diane Chen. I want to know exactly who fabricated the evidence, who gave the orders, and who knew about it. I want every detail, every email, every communication. And I don't care whose names come up in the investigation. Sir, if this implicates certain members of your family or the board, I said I don't care. Get me the truth, all of it. He ended the call and started walking. Not toward his penthouse apartment, not toward his mother's estate, but just walking through the quiet streets, past small shops and families heading home from dinner, past a life he'd never allowed himself to imagine. By the time he reached his car 2 blocks away, he had 47 missed calls. He got in and finally answered one, Min-jae. His mother's voice was terrifyingly calm. We need to talk. Yes, we do. Tomorrow, my office. 10 a.m. The board has already called an emergency meeting. They want to discuss your fitness to continue as CEO. Let them discuss it. You cannot be serious. You've canceled your wedding, humiliated the Park family, and for what? A woman who betrayed you and a child who might not even be yours? She is mine. Min-jae's voice was steel. And Diane never betrayed me. You made sure I believed she had, but you were wrong, or you were lying. Either way, it ends now. If you pursue this path, I'm not asking your permission, Mother. I'm informing you of my decision. I have a daughter. I'm going to know her, to be her father. And if that means losing my position, my company, everything, so be it. The silence stretched out. When his mother spoke again, her voice had changed, not softer, but different, calculating. You truly care about this child. She's my daughter. Then you understand what I was trying to protect you from. The scandal, the complications, the impossible position of raising a mixed-race illegitimate child while running a Korean conglomerate. I was trying to save you from this exact situation. You were trying to save your idea of the perfect heir, the perfect company. You weren't thinking about what I wanted, what I needed. You never have. I am your mother. Everything I do, everything you do is about control, about maintaining the Kang legacy at any cost. But I'm done paying that cost, Mother. I'm done sacrificing real things for the appearance of perfection. He ended the call before she could respond. His hands were shaking, adrenaline coursing through him. In one evening, he dismantled his entire future. The wedding, the merger, his relationship with his mother, possibly his position in the company, and yet he felt lighter than he had in 5 years. The next morning, Min-jae walked into the emergency board meeting at 9 a.m., an hour before it was scheduled to start. His mother was already there, along with 3 senior board members. They looked up as he entered, their expressions ranging from concerned to hostile. "We need to discuss your recent actions," his mother began. "No," Min-jae said calmly. "You need to listen." He laid the folder his lawyer had delivered at 6 a.m. on the conference table. "5 years ago, you accused Diane Chen of corporate espionage. You showed me security footage, access logs, communication records. All of it was fabricated. My lawyer has the originals here, along with communications between Mother and the VP of Security at the time, detailing exactly how the evidence was manufactured and when." The room went very quiet. Furthermore, Min-jae continued, "Diane was pregnant when she left. With my daughter. A daughter whose existence was threatened if Diane didn't disappear quietly. Those threats came directly from this office, from people in this room. Min-jae," his mother's voice was low, dangerous. "You're making serious allegations." "I'm stating facts that are documented in this folder, which has been copied and secured with 3 different law firms. If anything happens to me, to Diane, or to my daughter, these documents become public. Every news outlet, every regulatory agency, every shareholder will know exactly what was done in the name of protecting the Kang family reputation." One of the board members, Mr. Song, cleared his throat. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I'm proposing transparency. I'm acknowledging my daughter publicly. I'm bringing Diane's name cleared of all charges, with a formal apology from this company. And I'm making it very clear that anyone who threatens my family again will face legal consequences. The scandal will be enormous," another board member said. "The stock price will recover, or it won't. Either way, I'm not building my daughter's life on lies and cover-ups." Min-jae looked directly at his mother. "You taught me that the Kang legacy was everything, but you were wrong. Family is everything, and I finally have the chance to build a real one." His mother stood, her chair scraping against the floor. "If you do this, you're on your own. I won't protect you from the consequences. I know. I'm counting on it." She walked out, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The remaining board members looked at each other, then at Min-jae. "We'll need to make a statement," Mr. Song said finally. "Control the narrative as much as possible. I'll draft something today, and the park merger, dead. I'll handle the fallout personally." The meeting continued for another hour, laying groundwork, planning damage control, but Min-jae's mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about a small bakery, a little girl with his eyes, and a woman who'd been strong enough to raise their daughter alone when he'd been too weak to stand beside her. At lunch, he called the number on the card. Diane answered on the 3rd ring. "Hello? It's me," I told the board. I confronted my mother. "I'm going public with Lena's existence." A long pause. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Another pause. He could hear her breathing, could imagine her standing in her bakery, trying to decide if she could trust him. "Lena has swimming lessons tomorrow at 4, she said finally, "at the community center on Oak Street. If you want to watch, if you want to meet her properly. Be there at 3:30. We'll talk to her together first." "I'll be there, Min-jae." "Yes, don't make me regret this." The call ended. Min-jae sat in his office looking out at Seoul spread below him, and for the first time in 5 years he felt something like hope. The next afternoon, Min-jae arrived at the community center at 3:15, 15 minutes early. He'd changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on jeans and a simple sweater, the most casual outfit he'd worn in public in years. He'd left his security detail at the office, driven himself, parked 2 blocks away. Diane was already there, standing by the entrance, Lena beside her in a pink swimsuit with a unicorn on it. a towel in her small hands. When Lena saw him approaching, she pressed closer to her mother. "Mommy, it's the man from the bakery." "I know, sweetheart." Diane crouched down, bringing herself to Lena's eye level. "Remember how we talked this morning? About your daddy?" Lena nodded, her eyes wide. "This is him. This is your daddy. He's come to watch you swim today." Min-jae's knees almost buckled. Hearing the words spoken aloud, seeing Lena's eyes widen with understanding, it was overwhelming. "You're my daddy?" Lena's voice was tiny, uncertain. Min-jae crouched down too, making himself smaller, less intimidating. "Yes, I am. And I'm very, very happy to meet you properly, Lena. Mommy said you lived far away. I did, but not anymore. I want to be close if that's okay with you." Lena studied him with those eyes that were so like his own. Then, with the devastating directness of a 4-year-old, "Why didn't you come before?" Min-jae glanced at Diane, who gave him a small nod. Permission to answer honestly. "Because I made a mistake," Min-jae said softly. "A big mistake. I didn't know you existed, and when I found out, I came as fast as I could." "Oh," Lena processed this. "Are you going to leave again?" "No. I'm going to stay. I'm going to be here for every swimming lesson, every birthday, every time you want to show me a drawing or tell me a story. If you'll let me—" Lena looked at her mother again. Diane's eyes were bright with tears, but she was smiling. "It's up to you, baby. Do you want Daddy to watch you swim today?" Lena thought about it for a long moment. Then she held out her hand to Min-jae. "Okay, but you have to sit in the special seats for families." Min-jae took her small hand in his, and something in his chest cracked wide open. "I'll sit wherever you want me to sit." They walked into the community center together, Diane on one side, Min-jae on the other, and Lena between them, chattering about how she could swim 5 whole strokes now without stopping. Min-jae listened to every word, memorizing her voice, the way she pronounced strokes as strokes, the way she swung their joined hands as she walked. At the pool, Lena ran off to join her class. Min-jae and Diane sat on the bleachers, watching her jump into the water with a splash that made the instructor laugh. "She's amazing," Min-jae whispered. "She is." Diane's voice was soft. "Min-jae, I need you to understand something. This doesn't mean we're back together. This doesn't mean I've forgiven everything that happened. I know, but you deserve to know your daughter, and she deserves to know her father. So we're going to figure this out, one day at a time." "One day at a time," Min-jae agreed. They sat in silence, watching Lena kick her way across the pool, her instructor cheering her on. And when Lena looked up at the bleachers, searching, and her face lit up when she saw both of them there watching her, Min-jae knew he'd made the right choice. He'd given up his wedding, possibly his company, his mother's approval, his carefully constructed life. But in return, he'd gotten this. A little girl with his eyes and her mother's strength, swimming in a community pool, waving at him like he'd hung the moon. It was, Min-jae thought, the best trade he'd ever made. When the lesson ended, Lena bounded over, dripping wet, proud of herself for swimming 7 strokes instead of 5. She showed Min-jae the gold star her instructor had given her, and he admired it like it was the Nobel Prize. "Can Daddy come to ice cream after?" Lena asked Diane. Diane looked at Min-jae, a question in her eyes. He nodded. "Daddy can come to ice cream," she confirmed. And so Min-jae found himself in a small ice cream shop, watching his daughter debate between chocolate and strawberry, eventually choosing strawberry with rainbow sprinkles. They sat at a small table, and Lena told him about her favorite books, her best friend from preschool, the cat she wanted to get someday. Min-jae listened to every word, aware that his phone was probably exploding with messages, that the statement he'd released that morning about having a daughter was probably causing chaos, that his mother was likely planning her next move. But none of it mattered. Not right now. Right now he was eating ice cream with his daughter, watching her get rainbow sprinkles on her nose, listening to Diane laugh as Lena told a rambling story about a dragon who loved cupcakes. Right now, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. And if you've made it this far in the story, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button, leave a comment about what you thought of Min-jae's journey, and give this video a like. It really helps us create more stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and remember, Sometimes the greatest power we have is the courage to choose what really matters. See you in the next story.